This is episode number 183. Today, we're interviewing community expert Mary Longe, who runs PleinAir Chicago, and she's going to talk about how to create local plein air groups and how to keep your group thriving.
This is the PleinAir Podcast with Eric Rhoads, publisher and founder of PleinAir Magazine. In the PleinAir Podcast, we cover the world of outdoor painting. Called plein air, the French coined the term, which means open air or outdoors. The French pronounce it plein air. Others say plein air. No matter how you say it, there is a huge movement of artists around the world who are going outdoors to paint. And this show is about that movement. Now, here's your host, author, publisher, and painter, Eric Rhoads.
Why, thank you, Jim Kipping, and welcome everybody to the PleinAir Podcast. And happy August, everybody, if you're listening to this on time. I want to say hi to all our new listeners. We have had millions, yes, millions of downloads now, and we've picked up a massive number of new listeners from PleinAir Live, our worldwide virtual summit, which had a huge attendance. The event was a big hit. The beginner's day and then the 4 days of top artists, everybody absolutely loved it. Everybody was painting together virtually and interacting, getting to know one another, making new friends. And I even received a note today that said it was like a fire hose into a teacup, so much information. So that's a good thing, right? You want a lot of information. You don't want to be wanting more. So anyway, another person told me she had found her tribe. It was a huge success. She met a lot of people and turned out to be twice as many people as the PleinAir convention. So we got a lot of people who came on board and people all over the world. So thank you, everyone who joined us for PleinAir Live. We have offered at PleinAir Live, we offered our attendees a new event called Realism Live, and over 600 of them signed up for the first virtual conference covering covering realism and covering painting, drawing realistic subjects like landscapes, portraits, still life figures, florals, seascapes, and a whole lot more. And it's taking place in October, and we're going to shoot for another world record. This will be the world's largest virtual art conference and the world's largest painting together, which is going to be fun. You can be a part of it. You can see some amazing painters like Dan Gerhartz, Rose Franson, Daniel Sprick, Juliet Aristides, Joshua LaRock, Graydon Parrish, and many, many more to be announced. It's going to be an absolutely amazing experience, and you get to do it from your home. It's super exciting. It's lots of fun. We interact with one another, and it's going to be a great, great experience. And as you know, a lot of plein air painters do figures and portraits and still life and flowers and more. It's all painting, it's studio painting, but it's important that you know how to do these subjects too. It'll be a real boost for your painting, your confidence, and you'll make a lot of new friends. So I'll be hosting the event, so sign up for Realism Live at realismlive.com. Coming up after the interview, I'm going to be answering marketing questions in the Art Marketing Minute. But first, let's get right to our interview with Mary Longe. Mary Longe, welcome to the PleinAir Podcast.
Well, thanks, Eric. It's very nice to be here.
Well, it's the reason I wanted to have you on, first off, you've done a remarkable job with PleinAir Chicago, and it is probably one of the most active and successful plein air groups in America. And I think that I'm sure that there are a lot of people behind it, but I know that you've had a lot to do with it. And so I want to talk about that, but more importantly is I want to talk about things like how to make groups successful and how some of the things that you would recommend to others so that they can do the same things that you've done in their own way.
That's great.
So,
and it's been a lot of fun. Mm-hmm.
So part of this, I think, probably has a little to do with your background. Can you give me a 50,000-foot view of what you did in the past? Because this might help other groups identify people in their groups who might have the right skill sets that are necessary.
Yeah, and I think, Eric, one of the things that's made this successful for us, or for me even, is that it came at the right time in my life. So as I was growing my own sense of being an artist, and also as I retired out of the work world, and I worked for the American Hospital Association for the last 10 years of my career, and I had also worked there for 10 years early in my career. But what I had been doing in that was working with corporations that wanted to sell into hospitals. So I was doing marketing strategy plans for companies of all different sizes. So I was running visioning sessions, and I was thinking about how to get people involved and how to get healthcare involved. And I was thinking about all the kinds of questions that really go into membership, because that's what I worked for, a membership organization. So in many ways, this was a perfect fit for me at a perfect time. It all converged as I was thinking about retirement, and also in terms of the Plein Painters of Chicago. There was a group of people that had been going out to paint since 2003. Scott Tallman Powers, who I know you have videos with, was this huge force behind the people in Chicago who like to do plein air, and just would get people going out all year round in our wonderful climate in Chicago. But really, after Scott moved out west, there were other people had taken over and had some movement and some groups going out, but it wasn't a regular thing as much. And when I got involved, there were people that were wanting more, but there was no leadership in any way. So that's how we got started, was just deciding that we would get some of the people that were most wanting something more than what we had. And that was a good time for me to step up, and I actually offered to do a visioning session where we brought those noisy people together and said, what do you want to do? What would you like an organization to be?
Well, and I want to talk about that. There's a couple of subjects that have come up through what your answer was here. The one thing that I've recognized, and this is true for pretty much anybody, is that oftentimes there's a dynamic leader, somebody who really has vision, somebody has the mixture of the aggressiveness to get things started, the confidence to get things started, the ability to rally people behind her or him. And so organizations can grow very fast and can get a lot of traction very fast when they get the right kind of catalyst individual behind them, but they also can die or falter equally as fast when that person disappears. And so part of the process that I'd like to know about is, how do you develop a structure so that the structure is there and makes it so the organization is not necessarily reliant on an individual?
So I'll laugh at that because I keep thinking about succession planning. And I also know that I never take on a project or even get behind a project without thinking that I will do it myself. So there is a little bit of that. And in fact, we're doing these great things right now with our virtual paintouts. And the other day I asked somebody, I asked our group, could somebody please step up and moderate it? Because I want to take a night off to go to a birthday celebration, and no one stepped up. So the reality is, then I had to go fishing for someone, and that's actually a lot of what happens. So, I think as your question is a really good one, because I think all along that there is great need for that leadership, and I think our people get behind the things that they want to get behind, and so it's been great to have lots of people involved in different things, and that's one of the things that we have done is make sure that when people sign up to participate in the Plein Painters of Chicago, that they also identify where they will volunteer and what they're going to be interested in. But that doesn't say that they will be long-term volunteers, or most people, it seems, want to do kind of a one-and-done kind of volunteering. So that's something that we continue to think about. But I think the other thing I want to just speak to is that when we did our visioning session, part of that process that I facilitated was to get out all the things that people wanted. and that included the competitions and going on trips and, taking groups to, as you would, to Russia or, to different places. It all got on the board at one point. And then when you get down to that piece about, okay, who's going to do it, there weren't many hands being raised. So we decided that we would really get and this is part of my thinking about all this, is to keep everything as simple as possible. But we decided that we had 4 elements, the PleinAir Painters of Chicago, and they were that our mission was to paint. We just wanted to paint together. That was the thing that most people came out for. But also to improve our painting. So that meant anything to do with education and maybe having demos and things like that. The third thing was to make artists more visible so that we could have more sales. So visibility of the artist and sales was a third thing. And then just having fun, or, as it gets written, it's called camaraderie. But to me, it's just like, it's camaraderie and inclusion. That everybody who comes to us, they will be included in, whether we go out to lunch or, we're going to stay far, far away from excluding people. So it's those 4 things: painting, improving, visibility, and camaraderie is, and anything else that we think about doing when somebody brings up an idea about, let's do a competition, or let's, some kind of big outing. It's great. Go ahead, and do it.
Well, and I think that one of the important things that you've said here, which clearly you learned from corporate America, is maybe you did, I assume so, is if you have a very clear strategy in mind, all those great ideas that everybody comes up with don't get done because they don't fit the strategy. So
that's right.
So I was teaching on my Facebook Live at noon the other day, and I was talking about strategy and the difference between strategy and tactic. And a tactic is how you would get something done. Advertising is a tactic, for instance, but strategy is who am I going after, where am I going after them, how what am I going to say to them, and then everything else kind of fuels that. And anything that does not fit within that strategy really gets kind of pushed aside. And what I love about that is it gives you tremendous clarity, because everybody's got 1,000 ideas. And when you're running an organization like yours, you're having to combat that. And so it's real easy to be able to say, okay, so let's go back to the strategy. Is it painting? Yes. Does it improve our painting? No. Does it give us visibility or sales? No. Does it give camaraderie? No. Well, it doesn't fit. If it's not fitting within those 4 things. Is that right?
That's exactly right. And, I think on top of that, then we really looked at our stakeholders and how we wanted to spend time creating them. So artists and wannabe artists are basically our primary stakeholders and the people that we are working with. We have secondary ones that we thought about, collectors and, the community for partnerships and things. But for the collectors, we also decided that we wanted this to be simple, and so we haven't wanted to go after things that would generate revenue for us, because we have nothing really that we need to spend it on, because we just want to go out and paint. And we finally have, we bought a microphone, so if we had demos, we could hear somebody outside. But we've really kept all of this very simple, and the stakeholders, we've kept it at the artist and not at, even though that may be part of our sales, we haven't really spent created, I guess, the strategy for that at this point, or the tactics really to get us greater numbers of collectors behind us. But I think we've really said the artists in particular are who we're going after.
So if you were advising someone today, somebody picks up the phone and calls you and says, Mary, I want to start a plein air group in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, and what do I do? Do I incorporate it? How do I get it rolling? What is the process to get people behind it? Which is always the hard thing, especially if you don't really know who in your community may or may not be a plein air painter, or if they even exist.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think what really worked for us is that we had a few people. We had probably 10 people that were our first group, and that were our steering committee. So we had some idea of who was out there. But I think the first thing for me would be about having a visioning session. What do we want this to be? Because as I have had those kind of calls at times, some people want to just do things that will generate revenue. I mean, that's what they have behind it. They want to make money, and so they think if they do competitions, they will make money. Others want to do some sort of more in terms of shows and exhibits and things. So I think it's, really getting that clarity absolutely is the first thing. I think the next thing is then trying to figure out those folks that are going to make that happen. I don't want to do anything without that group behind us. Now, the other thing I have to say that I haven't mentioned is that we are under the auspices of the Palette and Chisel, this venerable arts group, that academy here in Chicago that Richard Schmid was a major part of, and it's a group that takes care of our liability and it handles our money. And for me, as sort of leader of this group, I keep them informed. I give them an annual plan, and I tell them about our annual budget. And they don't really ask us any other questions. But having that as behind us, so I know that if somebody falls or whatever else, when we're out painting, that as a group, I don't have to worry about that so much because we do have that liability insurance and those kinds of things behind us. So I'm sure there are other things that other groups should be thinking about that would create an infrastructure of safety and care. I
think you've brought up a really interesting point. Is if you could have a relationship, a partnership, if you will, with some organization. There are tons in all communities. There are local arts organizations, and so by having a relationship with a local arts organization and coming under their umbrella, you're saving yourselves a lot of problems.
But it's incredibly helpful for us, and I don't have to worry about the financial aspects of it. I mean, we have our own sort of treasurer and we have no titles really for any of our steering committee, but someone who acts kind of as a treasurer, just to kind of figure out where we are on our planning. But everything else then goes through the Palette and Chisel, and so that's been incredibly helpful, and they're so supportive of us and art in Chicago. So that's been very helpful.
How many members do you have, and how far do they come in from?
So it's interesting. So after this, in 2017, when we did this visioning session, one of the things we said is that we did want, we wanted to buy the microphone, which, by the way, is one of these $89 microphones, and that hooks on a belt, or actually it hooks for us when somebody's doing a demo. And because we have a lot of older, seasoned artists, it's often difficult as the artist is facing forward to hear. Right. And so we said, we just need a little microphone for the back of the artist so that they can keep looking forward and talking. And so it gives new meaning to sort of talking out of your back end. But it's a way, that was the one thing we wanted to buy. And in particular. And so we decided we would charge, but we wanted a little bit of a membership driver. And so we started something 3 years. We've now had 3 that we call I Heart Plein Air. And we had demos. We had people showing their kits. And then a panel of the seasoned members talking about how they do their painting, and that was our first day, the first time that we did that. But it was a way to, so we did charge a fee, a $65 fee for people to come, and that gave us some money to work with. Besides the microphone, it did allow us to not have to charge for our annual show that we do at the Palette and Chisel, and it allowed us to do a couple other things. And so that first year we had about 65 people that signed up. By the end of the second year, last year, we had about 110. And this year, even with COVID, we have about that. We have 104, I think, members right now, and that's without anything but what's been driving it. We did have we actually had our I Heart Chicago on March 4th, and Eric, you've been part of the last two of them by Skype. But in those, we have had, with people coming to those, we had, I guess what I want to say about that is that on March, I think it was March 7th that we had our one for this year. And then, of course, we went into lockdown. And at that point, we really didn't have too much more to do for members, because that meant our shows that we were planning would be canceled. But it turns out we actually started virtual paintouts over Zoom that have become very popular. So to answer the second part of your question, we now have members from the corners of the United States. So people have joined us from Arizona and out east, and we have people from Florida and Wisconsin on a regular basis. Yeah, it's been terrific, because we've had guest artists every single week talking about some aspect of plein air painting. When we do paintouts, we have people that come regularly from the middle of Michigan. We have people that come from Indiana and from Wisconsin. For us, really, if somebody's listening to this from other places and look at a map, it's really not that far.
Right.
But it's a 2-hour drive for people that come from Michigan anyway.
So in terms of, if you were to distill this down to a formula for somebody who wanted to have successful groups, how often do you do paintouts? How often do you do I guess you do your big event annually, your iHeart Plein Air annually?
Yes. So the way that we structured this year, and pretty much last year, we had something like 38 paintouts for both those years, 38 or 39. We go from the beginning of April till the end of October. That's in Chicago, the best months. We had last year 4 shows. We have one annual show. That's the big one that all of our members can participate in. And then we had some other ones that are either sort of quick paints and paint, then your painting goes up at a restaurant or a coffee shop. And we've had a couple of different paintouts with, one was Open House Chicago, which is a group that is an architectural group here in Chicago, and they open up many of the buildings that you want to see because of the great architecture here. And they invite us to paint at 3 or 4 of those different sites. So those are the things that we do. This year, of course, is crazy, and that's why we started our virtual paintouts, which have, I think, taught us that Zoom critiques have been incredible. We've had critics from, we had Collie Wilson from Australia the other night speaking to us from Brisbane, and people from California and Portland, Oregon, and as well as local people. So we've been able to have amazing critiques, and only our members can participate. And so they've had, at this point, I think 19 weeks of 19 different critiques on a weekly basis.
Outstanding. Yeah, we learned the same thing with Plein Air Live. We, by doing it virtually, we found that there were people who would never come to a live plein air convention in their life because of their circumstances, and yet they would come to this. And so we've been able to provide, a really great experience by doing that. And so my gut says that this all will continue in some form afterwards. I assume you'll continue to do virtual paintouts, because you can do them in the winter.
Well, that's exactly right. I think the one thing we learned recently is we did try a live paintout, and found that people could not social distance, though we had T-shirts made that say, "My painting looks best from 6 feet away." So we just had a very difficult time, and that question then back about inclusion and camaraderie actually became an issue. That there were a couple people who wanted to have lunch. Tables weren't big enough for people to sit far apart. Feelings were hurt, and so we realized that was going against our mission, and a bit of a problem that I had not anticipated. But right now, with the way that the virus is, we have decided not to have more paintouts until, from an evidence-based process, that we can show 2 weeks of improved statistics around the virus.
Yeah.
And so we just decided that we would go that way. And I suspect that we will probably end up canceling the rest of our season.
Yeah. So how do you prime the pump in terms of if you're doing live events or virtual events? How do you build a club? How do you get people to join? How do you spread the word? What do you, you guys kind of started out with a very few people, but you've got a pretty substantial group now.
Well, of course, you have to give them value. And so I think when you're able to identify what that value is, and those are our 4 elements, just having regular paintouts. There are other groups in the Chicago area, but they may go out once a month. We vary it so that people are in different neighborhoods. So I think it's the value in the places where the paintouts are, so we make sure that we are on the south side, on the west side, on the north side of Chicago. And by the way, given our current climate, we are looking in the future. We've already had a meeting that we will begin reaching out to some of the art groups that are in some of the areas that we don't typically go out to, where it may be in some of the neighborhoods that we haven't gone out to, and wanting to make sure that we can increase our sense of inclusion. So we'll be looking eventually, I think next year in particular, we'll begin to really look at working with some of the other arts organizations to partner with them. So I think that's one part of it, of building from other groups. We do have a very active Facebook page where anybody that's looking at Plein Air and Chicago, they will find us. We have a website that people can find us. We don't do a lot of other promotion, but we do other kinds of, we've been in the local papers, and there's people that are very much into public relations and things that have helped promote that. I think it's also, we have business cards that we hand out at each one of our, every single person that's a member gets a little badge which has our business cards in it. And so whenever anybody's around them, they're giving away their cards. So it's often, those conversations. So it's word of mouth, I guess. Our shows, we do advertise for those. There's gallery news and some other things here in Chicago that talk about, that do promote things like our shows. And so that's been a way for us to get new members, because they then see it there, and then will come and visit us and become part of our group.
Outstanding. Well, it sounds like you guys have thought of everything.
Oh, I don't know. I'm sure there's more. And I think this idea of keeping it simple has been a challenge, because it isn't easy with a volunteer group. I have to always remind myself that that we never allow enough time for anything. That with volunteers, that we absolutely have to put in more time in the planning and to get people to do things, and to, everything takes a little bit more education because people want to feel comfortable, even if it's knowing how to bring in food for one of our receptions or something. And I think just always, for every single event, just having really clear objectives. We've set objectives for how many artists we want. We have objectives as members. We've set objectives for how many paintings we want to sell. in terms of our sales and at our different specific shows. And we think about the tactics that you were talking about of how we're going to do that. So we don't leave it to chance. I can't say that we always hit them perfectly, but that's the other thing is that, in a group like this, perfection is really the enemy of completion sometimes, and sometimes it's just we just can't count on perfection for how things are going to get done. It's just we're glad that they get done.
Well, I would say they're very lucky to have you, and the reason I say that is because of your marketing and sales background. Not a lot of people even understand the concept of setting objectives and having something that's measurable so you know what you're shooting for rather than, hey, let's hope some people show up. And just that alone is a huge thing for organizations. And so I think, do you have some kind of a process or form or something? If you're creating something, do you have like a checklist or a sheet or something that you always go through, or is it just something in the back of your head?
I would say we do have a bit of a form. I use something that one of the things I didn't mention about my background is I did have a business for almost 20 years. So I have run a business before. So it's this is not like that. I don't feel quite the pressure that I had at that point. But I do have a form, and just about for everything we do, we write what I call a brief. And the brief has right at the top of it the objectives. And it will be about the stakeholders if there are multiple stakeholders for it. So what I mean by that is, how many artists we want, or how many people, how many collectors, how many sales do we want? Those kinds of things are listed on there. And then we write about, I have on that brief, the tactics that we're going to use, and the budget, and where that's coming from, and then at the end of each activity, then I will have a finished section on there of what the cost was and something for us to kind of look back on if we need to say, oh, it didn't quite go that way, or we spent more money on ads, or we found this vein of new people at this kind of place, and so we might try that the next time. So we use a brief for every event. But as I said earlier, we also have a plan for the year, and I've been reluctant to go off plan. We, of course, did with our virtual paintouts this year. But once we have it, if we're going to have 3 shows or 4 shows, then we stick to that. And if somebody comes saying, "Oh, I just found another place," then we go back and say, we've got our plan for the year.
Yeah.
And no, we don't have enough other volunteers to handle it.
Yeah, let's bring it up next year, or bring it up for future discussion.
That's right, and it's much easier to say that, and at that point, and I've just realized that the people that are running these other committees all have their own lives, and so they don't want to do more either. So it may be a great idea, but next year, we'll think about it.
Yeah, I've got a buddy that runs a nonprofit, and everybody's always throwing ideas at him. You should do this, or you should do that. And he does exactly what you did. Say, great, make it happen. And it kind of deflates the balloon, or else somebody makes it happen.
Well, that's exactly right. You're working with a group of creatives. So, expect it. That's the other thing. It's like, these are great ideas. I'm the worst. I can come up with ideas for new things and new ways to do it all day long. And I'm my own worst enemy. So I've had to learn it for myself. Otherwise, my business would not have succeeded for 20 years because I always had a new way of doing things. So at this point, I've learned that over and over again. And I continue to learn it here as well.
One of the things that I have found, and this is just a personal thing, but, I work all week. I want to spend the weekends with the family. I get a little bit of pressure to spend weekends with the family sometimes. And so, I oftentimes can't just slip out and go to an event on a weekend. So what I encouraged my local plein air group to do is to come up with double paint outs, the idea of doing something, on a weekday and then something on a weekend, because there are those of us who can't do weekends, but we could do a weekday. It's much easier to take a day off when the kids are in school, for instance. And that's for me, not for anybody else probably, but whereas I can't always get it on a weekend. And also certain days on weekends are more difficult for other people, so varying that up, one time doing it on a Saturday, another time on a Sunday, so that the people who can't go on Sundays can go on a Saturday.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because it reminds me that in our schedule, like I said, we go from south side to north side as one of the things we do with our paint outs. The other thing we do is make sure we go from landscape to cityscape. I mean, in the city of Chicago, you could be in the most beautiful park and still have a view of some sort of part of the city usually. But the other thing that we do is the first 3 weekends of the month, we paint on Saturdays. The fourth weekend, we paint on Friday nights and and Sunday mornings. We heard very clearly that some people wanted to do their laundry and go to the cleaners on a Saturday morning. So we decided that we would institutionalize it in a way and just say, okay, it's Friday, the fourth Friday of the month is our nocturne night. And Sunday morning, we'll go someplace else. And what that's done for us, too, is shown us that there's some other places on a Sunday morning that look a little different than a busy Saturday. So that's been very helpful for us to kind of think about, which locations, the most highly populated locations might be better on a Sunday.
Well, and you also have to keep in mind that some of your members are retirees and some of them are working professionals or otherwise. And so you got to make sure you keep everybody happy.
And we've had that thought about doing it during the week. And as that has come up, it's been, okay, let's do pop-ups. And so we have, because nobody wanted to take on that every single week having a Wednesday or some date that they wanted to paint. So we now suggest for people that want to paint during the week that they just put it on our Facebook page and say, I'm going to be at Montrose Harbor on Wednesday or wherever they're going to be, and we'll be there. And, people will say that they would, want to join them. And we found that the pop-ups actually help us a lot. Even now during COVID, when you can't have groups of more than 10 or as people just don't want to have, larger groupings, that the pop-ups are another way for us to have smaller paint-outs.
Yeah, excellent idea. Now, just a different topic entirely, because a lot of us don't paint in the city. What do you face when you paint in the city? Do you run into certain issues, problems, concerns, regulations, etc.?
In Chicago, we've never had issues around regulations as other places. I think the only one that I know of is right downtown at the Bean, our famous sculpture, Cloudgate, and we no longer can paint there. I actually have a letter into the Park District to see if I can get us to be able to do that at least once, during the year. We paint across the street, but for the most part, that isn't an issue. I think the issues that we have faced are when it's incredibly busy. And you have people that may not understand that. We had this paint out the other day, or a couple of weeks ago now, and I realized I hadn't done any sort of preparation of people who had never painted out before. Somebody set up in the middle of a sidewalk, and then it's just like, you can't do that. You have people all over. You're tripping people. They're going to be tripping you. So there is much about, in a way, some safety kind of things for yourself, just setting up your things. And I think some of the other aspects in the city, there is about, we suggest people buddy up, especially if somebody wants to walk away to a restroom or something. We do always plan to. Our criteria, for picking paint-outs places is about having good transportation there because people take the CTA, the buses, or the L to our paint outs, but also it's to have a restroom nearby. So if somebody wants to leave to use the restroom, they have somebody that will at least watch their items. So we think about those things. In the parks, there you may or may not have people wandering over. There could be people that are sleeping in the parks, or if we're, some of the great places to paint are like under some of the bridges and things like that. We are always concerned if there's street people that might be posing danger or whatever. So we try to get people to just stay in pairs if they can. They don't always do that. I don't always do it. But I think it's just being very much aware of surroundings, about your materials, about not having them strewn all over. And I think it's about, working painting in the city. It's also about thinking about your location and what it is that you're trying to say about it. And so it goes to the painting itself, and what are you trying to really express by being there.
So perhaps before we wrap up, you could tell people why you think it's important for them to consider belonging to a group, any plein air group. What's your best pitch for that?
Oh gosh. Well, so I've told you our 4 reasons for our group, but I think the camaraderie, the one I always list last, is my most important reason. I think it's about being with other painters, because from all of that is all the energy that allows me to do those other things. So I think being able to be around other people who, love the smell of paint, or for me, it's also, I knew I wanted to be a plein air painter when I saw people painting outside, painting a mountain, standing in the back of a pickup truck. I was out in Taos, New Mexico. It's like, wow, I want to do that. And then I want to do it even in the city, probably not in a pickup truck. But to be able to do it with other people, to be able to, I have been in all corners of Chicago, in all kinds of corners of Chicago that I had, never experienced before. And to be able to stand in one place and really see the city for 3 hours, to see a neighborhood, to see comings and goings, and to see kind of all the different the wonderful diversity that is Chicago has been. I love Chicago so much more than I knew before, because I now know it in a whole different way. And just walking with people downtown, it's like, wow, I've painted there. I've painted over there. That's where that's where Joy's easel fell in the river. That's where, just lots and lots of stories. So I think it's about loving an area. It's the camaraderie. And by the way, I'm getting to paint while I'm doing all that.
Well, what a great thing to get involved with too. If you're new to a community, so a friend of mine just moved to Santa Fe, and I was just thinking, wouldn't that be cool for her to get involved right away with a plein air group, because that all of a sudden you get to know 30 friends or 50 friends, and makes life easier, when you know people. And we all tend to be kind of victims of our friendships and the people we work with, and victims isn't the right word, but we kind of stick within our ranks. And it's nice to be able to get out and meet new people who have different experiences in life, different cultures, different diversity, et cetera.
Well, it's definitely this sense of place, when you are painting an area and being able to get to know it. That's the thing about Chicago. Now, we paint in Pilsen, the Hispanic area. We paint in Chinatown. We paint all over. And you're spending 3 hours in one place, being able to just take it all in. It's not just going into a restaurant and coming out again, or, it's just a great way to see it. Yeah. And want to go back to then. And then you probably do have lunch there. So I think that's part of it, that it's been a great way to get to know an area. So yes, moving into an area, that would be the first thing I would do, is find that or create it.
Yeah, or create it. And I think that's important for people listening. A lot of you are in areas and you don't think there are any other plein air painters, but you would be surprised. We've had several million downloads of this podcast now around the world, probably 70, 80, 90 countries. And there is the possibility of creating a plein air group, even in the smallest town. You'd be surprised. I mean, even here, I'm doing this right now from near Saranac Lake, New York, and it's a small little town of 2,500 people, but there's a whole bunch of plein air painters, and they, of course, have a big plein air event every year. And so I think it's really important to get, created if you don't have it.
I absolutely agree. And I think even when I travel now, I think about that and I look for those groups, because it's a way for me to, I was in Guanajuato, Mexico, and painting and finding other people to paint with. It's kind of been amazing to me to be able to take this other places, even if it's kind of my own meetup group. It's one way for me to go and travel as a single person to these
Absolutely.
different places. So
we're actually working on a product that you'll be able to dial in any community in the world and find the local plein air painters. We've got a little of that now. We have one called Paint Outdoors, it's pleinairforce.com. And Plein Air Force, you can put in a city and you can find somebody, but we've come up with a new way to do it that's going to be much more robust, and we just got to get it done. There's too many things to get done.
Well, I think that sounds like a great idea. I would definitely use that, Eric. I think it sounds like a great way.
Well, Mary, this has been delightful. You and I met at the FACE conference.
That's right.
Which was, I think you were there the first or second year in Miami. Why does a plein air painter go to a conference about figure painting? Curious.
To me, a figure is the microcosm of the landscape. So if I can make a forehead bend, I can make a tree in the distance recede. I don't know. I guess it's or I can paint a tree differently, but I think it's all about seeing. And so for me, the figure, the portrait is a wonderful way to enhance my plein air painting, and vice versa.
The discipline of painting the figure is that if the figure doesn't look like the figure and the model, you've got a problem. If something doesn't look like a tree, you can kind of get away with it. And so it really trains your brain in terms of drawing and more accuracy. We have quite a few people, I'd say about a third of the attendees that come to the FACE conference attend are from the plein air convention. So, they're people who are plein air painters as well. And this year, of course, we've canceled the Figurative Art Convention and Expo, and we're doing one called Realism Live, and we've expanded it. So Realism Live is not only the figure, not only the portrait. And by the way, we go from loose to tight. So you have people who paint very tightly academically. You have people who paint very loosely. And so we're going to be also doing still life and floral and landscape and the other disciplines, so that it's more like a whole inclusive art conference. And so we're going to do that in October. So I hope you'll get a chance to join us.
Well, that sounds wonderful. And it sounds like something that would be a terrific thing to be a part of.
Absolutely. Well, Mary, thank you so much. I think you've given a lot of people some inspiration. And by the way, I shouldn't be the one teaching marketing. You should be the one teaching marketing. You are so good. You have such great training and skills, and maybe we'll have to do something on marketing one day.
Well, you let me know. I'll be glad to help.
All right. Well, terrific. Thank you for joining us on the Plein Air Podcast.
Well, you're very welcome, and I appreciate being here.
Well, thanks again to Mary Longe. She's a very smart lady. She's doing a great job with Plein Air Chicago, and I want to thank her for her solid ideas and really good ideas. And if you don't have a club in your area, listen to that one more time, and I would encourage you to start one. She knows exactly how to do this. We need painters together all over the world, and if you don't have it in your community, you will find or you will encourage others to do some plein air painting. And so I think that was a good interview. Not so much that I did a good interview, that she did a good interview. Anyway, you guys ready for some marketing ideas?
This is the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhoads, author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, Make More Money Selling Your Art, Proven Techniques to Turn Your Passion into Profit.
Thank you, Jim Kipping. And you know, that book, it just keeps surprising me because it keeps selling on Amazon and other places. It's like every time I turn around, they're selling out. We have to print more. And so that's a pretty cool thing. It's a nice feeling. Thank you for making that happen. My goal in the Marketing Minute is to answer your art marketing questions. And you can email me anytime, eric@artmarketing.com. And try to use your name and your town so I know who you are. It's a little easier that way. This one is from Jesse. I don't know if that's a Jesse she or he, in Jesse in Santa Fe, who says, if I want to become a big name, the kind of artist who's getting invited to all the best shows, the best galleries, and getting pursued by collectors, how do I do it? Well, Jesse, that is a great goal. It's very doable, but it is a process, and you have to look at marketing as a process. You know that all great things take time. Nothing happens quick. Nothing happens overnight. Persistence and consistency are important. I can spend hours on this topic alone. I've spent hours and hours and hours on it in my videos and talk a lot about it in my book. I talk a lot on artmarketing.com, with a lot of ideas and things that you can use. And I don't have enough time to do that here, but you need to spend as much time and effort as possible getting great as an artist. You want to be as good as you possibly can be, but at some point you got to just get out there, and you need outsiders to give you advice on when your work is ready to be promoted. And then you need to know that this is a lifetime commitment, that if you're going to continue to sell paintings or try to sell paintings, you've got to be committed to a lifetime of marketing. Next, you need to start getting noticed. A great thing to do is to enter as many art competitions as possible, like the Plein Air Salon or the Artist and Selfie competition, and get some wins under your belt. Even if you're a category winner, it doesn't have to be the grand prize. You can be a runner-up, you can be a second place, a third place, a fifth place. It doesn't matter. What you need is something to help building your brand, help you build your brand, and have something to talk about, put on your resume. Branding is the big thing. A known artist is an invited artist. A known artist is a higher priced artist. The more you repeat your visibility campaigns, the more you get noticed. Branding is a lifetime commitment. As I said, over and over and over and over again for years. Now, you can speed it up with some advertising and things like that, but you also need time. You need publicity. You need shows. You need to do things that stand out, get noticed. Sometimes it's controversy. Sometimes it's, awards. I talk a lot about this in the things that I just mentioned, the books and the videos. Just keep pounding that marketing drum. Time cannot be completely overcome, but advertising can help you speed awareness, and then you just got to keep building on that awareness. Now, the next question comes from Cindy in Bar Harbor, Maine, who says, I see a lot of art competitions, but I don't know if I should ever enter them, which ones I should enter. Cindy, it's a great question. The answer is yeah or no. There are a lot of great competitions, and prize money is nice, but it's not a reason to enter anything. I know that sounds awkward, but if you want to enter an art competition, you want to win something that's going to further your career. For instance, many art magazines like mine, Fine Art Connoisseur does Artist and Selfie competition, Plein Air magazine does the Plein Air Salon competition. And though we have big prize money and a lot of other prizes, what you really want to do is end up with validation. You want to end up with something you can talk about. And most importantly, you want to end up with publicity. So if you got an award, let's say you got the main weight award from Plein Air Salon, we're doing stories about you. We're putting you on the cover of the magazine. We're doing stories about the people who are the secondary and third winners and so on. We're doing stories about category winners. And so you're getting publicity, and publicity is more valuable than money. I know that seems odd, but you can't necessarily buy publicity. You could buy advertising, but you can't buy publicity. And so when you get that opportunity, it's more valuable. So it's okay to apply to things that just have prize money. And, but if they're not going to be able to promote you by giving you articles and things, maybe they're giving you articles to their list of other artists, but you want to be seen by collectors, you want to be seen by gallery owners. And so, if you win from something like a national art magazine like ours or others, then you're going to be seen by a lot of people, by a lot of the right people, museums, collectors, galleries, etc. The key is to enter and then to milk your win. What I mean by that is that even if it's a small category, like a still life category or a nocturne category, they don't get very many entries, and so you might have a better improved chance in a smaller category. Although sometimes you enter the same painting in 2 or 3 categories if it's a fit. And then you want to do press releases. Eric Rhoads just won the best nocturne painting for this national competition. You want to put it on your website, your business cards, everything. I just did a full hour YouTube video on this, and you can find it by going to YouTube and searching Streamline Art Video and look for the one that talks about how to win art competitions. A good marketer looks at every opportunity and asks if there is value to be obtained for it. You can look at it as something to build credibility. You can tell others about it. You can use it to build your list, whatever it is. So don't focus on the money. Big prizes are nice, but the real thing that, I'll tell you something, the cover of PleinAir magazine is worth a whole lot more than $15,000 to your career. I mean, I've watched careers launch because they won the PleinAir Salon competition. I've watched people go from locally known to nationally known and getting invited to everything. And that's happening because they're on the cover. That's happening because they're featured. It's not so much happening because they won the $15,000, but that's getting them there. So think in terms of what you can do to help build your credibility. And I hope that makes sense. Anyway, if it doesn't make sense, it should make sense.
This has been the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhoads. You can learn more at artmarketing.com.
A reminder to sign up for Realism Live, which is going to be the world's first realism conference covering multiple subjects like landscape, still life, flowers, portraits, figures, and so much more. You can learn more about that at Realism Live. I also do a blog on Sunday mornings. It's up to about 250,000 people, and that's kind of nice. It talks about life and art and philosophy and things like that. And so just check it out. It's called Sunday Coffee, and you can find it at coffeewitheric.com. You can subscribe. This is always fun. We'll do it again sometime like next week. I'll see you then. I'm Eric Rhoads, publisher and founder of PleinAir Magazine. Remember, it's a big world out there. Go paint it. We'll see you. Bye-bye.
This has been the PleinAir Podcast with PleinAir Magazine's Eric Rhoads. You can help spread the word about plein air painting by sharing this podcast with your friends. And you can leave a review or subscribe on iTunes so it comes to you every week. And you can even reach Eric by email, eric@pleinairmagazine.com. Be sure to pick up our free ebook, 240 plein air painting tips by some of America's top painters. It's free at pleinairtips.com. Tune in next week for more great interviews. Thanks for listening.